Began as a humanitarian crisis, thousands of Central American children attempting to cross the southern U.S. border, is now a matter of policy and politics. President Obama has called on Congress to approve nearly $4 billion to address the influx of children, but his decision not to visit the southern border this week during a trip to Texas has been criticized by the right and even some on the left. We'll talk with a key House leader in a moment, but first, the governor of Texas, who met with President Obama this week, Rick Perry. Governor Perry, welcome back to Fox News Sunday.
Good morning.
Let me ask you, Governor, first of all, about the call you and others have made to send the National Guard down to the border. What exactly would National Guardsmen and women do on the border?
Well, we called some 4 years ago for 1,000 National Guard troops to temporarily go to the border so that they could help push forward that show of force, if you will. And they're there for a limited period of time until you have the opportunity to train up some 3,000 more Border Patrol agents that would go and replace them. What that does, and you move the Border Patrol forward. The President was not even aware that his Border Patrol was back 40 or 45 miles away from the border at these checkpoints. They need to be right on the river. They need to be there as a show of force, because that's the message that gets sent back very quickly to Central America. And it's important to do that because this flood of children is pulling away the Border Patrol from their normal duties of keeping bad people, keeping the drug cartels. They're being distracted. So that, I will suggest to you, is a very obvious reason that those National Guard troops could come play an important role.
But if you strung them out along the border, National Guardsmen and women, they're not, under the law, allowed to apprehend any of these children that are crossing, are they?
Well, the issue is with being able to send that message, because it's the visual of it, I think, that is the most important. And we know that. We listen to the conversations, or I should say their conversations are being monitored with calls back to Central America. And the message is, hey, come on up here. Everything is great. They're taking care of us. And that needs to stop, because if you don't stop the bleeding, if you don't staunch this flow of individuals that are coming up here, this is only going to get worse. And at that particular point in time, the size of this crisis is even going to be more monumental.
I think nearly everybody agrees with that, Governor, but the question I'm trying to get at with you is this. If these children who have undergone these harrowing journeys to escape from the most desperate conditions in their home countries have gotten this far, are they really going to be deterred by the presence of troops along the border who won't shoot them and can't arrest them?
And I think we're talking about two different things here. And what we're talking about is sending the message back now so that we can staunch the bleeding. Those that are already here, to address them, to humanitarily take care of them, to make sure that they are safe, process them as quickly as you can, to reunite them with their families. That's the most humanitarian thing that we can do. And the National Guard is absolutely a trained group of men and women that can address that particular function, and one that they should. They're not there in a vacuum. We have massive amounts of Texas law enforcement now, whether it's our Texas Ranger recon teams there. You saw some of that on Fox this last week with the boats that we have in the river, the Texas Parks and Wildlife. Those are all law enforcement individuals who can, in fact, arrest those that have illegally come in and appropriately deal with them. But more importantly, this is allowing the Border Patrol to get back to what they are supposed to do. Right now, reports of up to 70% of them are taking care of these young people who have come in rather than doing their job of securing the border.
Governor, let me turn, if I can, to the President's comments the other day after his meeting with you, in which he said that he hoped that you would put the heat on the Texas congressional delegation, to pass this nearly $4 billion measure that he's proposing to deal with this crisis. First of all, what do you think about that proposal? And second, are you prepared to pressure, or at least encourage, the members of the Texas delegation to vote for it?
Well, I appreciate the time that the President gave me. I think it was important for him to take time and to listen to what is really going on the border. I do think he should go to the border himself and take a look at this, just like some of his Democrat colleagues and a number of us on the Republican side want him to. as I look at that piece of legislation, it is a very large amount of money. And as you analyze it, very little of it is for border security. And I think until he gets realistic about the problem and how you deal with the problem, and it is a border security issue. And we've got a track record now of 5+ years of him disregarding what's going on the border. So here's his opportunity to truly lead. Don't blame this on anyone. Be a leader, lay out a plan, and I will suggest you, actually the president doesn't have to have this big amount of money. He could pick up the phone today, call the DOD, and direct them to have those 1,000 National Guard troops on the border.
So in other words, Governor, you don't particularly support the bill, and you're not going to be encouraging your delegation to pass it. Is that a fair assessment? I
think you have distilled the correct answer.
Let me see if I can make another distillation, Governor. There's a law. The laws on the books now seem to mean that if one of these children from Central America is able to set foot on American soil, he or she is entitled to be taken into custody, given an immigration hearing notice, and then cared for by the federal government until their case can be disposed of by a judge. That being the case, doesn't the law have to be changed to enable you to stem the flow of these children coming into the country?
Yes. Yes. Well, there are two things going on here. That law needs to be changed, partly because it is discriminatory, if it will, between other than Mexicans and individuals who come from Mexico. So that law needs to be changed. I think members of Congress understand it needs to be changed, both Democrats and Republicans. But the other side of that is to staunch this flow, you do not have to have a change of law. What you have to have is this clear presence on the border where people understand that you no longer can just freely go and walk across the Rio Grande and stay in America from now on. That's the message that was sent by these failed policies.
I get that that's the message, Governor. What I don't quite understand is how it is that with the law being the way it is, the presence of more troops or forces on the border who are not legally able to apprehend these immigrants, these border crossers, is going to change anything without the law being changed first.
Here's the way it will. The presence, and we've done this multiple times, we've surged large amounts of Texas law enforcement with local law enforcement and coordinating with our Border Patrol into sectors. We just don't have the ability on a 1,200-mile border to do that. About 20% of the individuals that are coming across are these unaccompanied alien children. You got 80% of the people out there that these laws don't fall into,
right.
But we're being pulled away having to deal with these children. And my point is, you bring boots on the ground to send that message clearly, both visually and otherwise. And at that particular point in time, I think this flow from Central America gets staunched by a substantial margin. The president would be wise to put those National Guard troops on the border, and he doesn't have to have Congress's approval for that. Pick up the phone, be a leader, make a difference.
Governor, I think we got the message. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Yes, sir.
Let us now bring in House Homeland Security Chairman Congressman Michael McCaul, also of Texas. First of all, Mr. Chairman, let's discuss this situation that has led. I'm talking here not about the flow of adult aliens from everywhere, but about these children who have come in such numbers now in the last year and more from Central America. As Governor Perry noted, the law treats them differently than those from Mexico or from Canada, assuming there would ever be any from Canada. What is your view on the law and the changes that may be needed in it, and what kind of priority does that deserve in trying to address this crisis?
Well, there were two laws at issue. One was an executive action taken by the president after Congress failed to pass the DREAM Act in 2012. When you look at the surge...
What does that do?
Well, it allowed illegal alien children to stay in the United States.
But only a certain category of illegal alien children, correct?
Prior to 2007.
So these children that are crossing the border now are ineligible for any protections afforded by that law, correct?
They are, but the problem is the drug traffickers who market this to the children in Central America and make money off them, $5,000 to $8,000 a head, are selling this line to them that if they get into the United States, they can stay. And when DHS, Department of Homeland Security, interviewed 90% of these children said, I came because I could get a free pass, a permiso to stay in the United States.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that the Obama order caused that. Isn't it the case, as I discussed with Governor Perry, that under the law, if they can get their feet on the ground on this side of the border, they're entitled to a range of protections which will keep them in this country for some period of time. And at the rate of $50,000 a year, it's likely to be a very long time indeed before deportation proceedings can be carried out.
That's correct. So the first executive action created the perception they get a permiso free pass. The second piece, the 2008 trafficking law,
that came first, though, right? 2008. Right?
2008, that's correct. If you're from Mexico, you have a more expeditious removal from the United States, returned home. Other than Mexicans are treated differently.
Right.
We think that they should be treated the same under this law.
And if they were treated the same, that would mean, would it not, that a Border Patrol agent apprehending one of these, or a group of these immigrant children could say, I'm sorry, they could turn them away on the spot, correct?
It would provide for a more swift removal and return to home safely to Central America. Now, those with a fear of persecution and violence would have a legal basis to possibly stay, but we think that law needs to be changed. And you have to do that because you have to have a message of deterrence. Look, Brett, I was down there on the border, unlike the president. I saw these children. It's very heart-wrenching as a father to see that. Mothers with their babies. I also saw some 17-year-olds that I thought looked more like a threat to coming into the United States. But the fact is, until, they're caught in the middle. They're the victims caught in the middle between the administration's policies and what the drug traffickers are doing in Central America. And so they have this perilous, dangerous journey through Mexico where they're exploited, abused, raped, and in some cases don't make it at all. Right. And we think if we change this law as a message of deterrence, we can actually protect and save these children.
All right. Now, where does it matter legislatively? Where does this whole matter stand? The president's request for $4+ billion, which I guess in addition to dealing with this, also deals with money for wildfires, and this attempt to change the law. Can he get any of this money without that law being changed first, or at least part of it?
Well, our view, I think, as House Republicans is, look, we're not going to write a blank check for over $4 billion or scrubbing it. Now, it's going to be a more targeted approach probably through the end of the fiscal year. But also on the policy side, I'm on the Speaker's working group. We're looking at things like changing the 2008 law. We're looking at things like my border security bill that passed out of my committee, putting that as a provision so that finally we can get this thing done.
Well, how likely is it that there will be action on this issue soon?
I think we have to act soon. It's a crisis at hand that demands action, a call for action. It's a very tragic human crisis at the border, none like I've ever seen before. Right. So I think we need to act before the August recess.
What do you think? So what do you think? What do you think the chances are that this is? That you're going to get action?
I think very good if we can have a targeted appropriations bill that also deals.
How much would you be willing to vote for?
Well, that's up to the appropriators, but I think it's going to be, again, very limited to the end of this fiscal year rather than a 2-year appropriation. So, and it'll also be, 4% of the president's supplemental budget deals with border security. We think more should be allocated towards that. Again, my bill that came out of my committee deals with that in an accountable way with a 2-year timeline to get operational control of the border, which is what most people want. Most Americans want security first.
In the meantime, are you prepared to vote for money to accommodate these children who have already crossed?
I think we have to deal with this in a humane, compassionate way, but I'm not in favor of building large warehouses in the United States to warehouse these kids. I think we need to have deterrence. And I think if we're going to build facilities, perhaps we should think about doing that in the countries of origin in Central America where they can, better deal with these children.
That won't be cheap, though, will it?
Look, again, it's about deterrence, and it's about security, and it's about dealing with these children in a humane, compassionate way to return them safely to home.
Mr. Chairman, good of you to come in. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.